Hello. Thank you for visiting the Other Woman and Man Stories channel. Don't forget to subscribe. And here we go. My wife and I have been together for 6 years now. Everything is going well in our everyday life. We have a 2-year-old daughter. My wife is a very attractive woman with a beautiful figure, long legs, a petite, well-groomed chest, and soft skin. I loved her deeply. But now let's get to the heart of the matter. My wife worked for a decaying company. Why do I say that? Let me explain. This company couldn't be called good because the relationships between employees were clearly irresponsible and unprofessional. How do I know this? I'll tell you. I didn't want my wife to go to the corporate event. I just felt that something would go wrong. She started preparing for this event 2 weeks ago, shopping for a dress, shoes, and even perfume. She chose the fragrance herself. I didn't like the smell, but my wife said that I wouldn't have to smell it anyway, and that the scent was only needed until the evening, and upon return she would wash it off in the shower. The dress she chose had a very revealing neckline. I didn't like any of it, but my wife playfully said that she loved me, but wanted to make an impression on her female colleagues who, by the way, had a bet on who would look better. They bet a case of expensive champagne. The New Year celebration in the team started at 4 in the afternoon and lasted until 11. That's how it's done now. Besides, I had no reason not to trust my wife. She had never let me down. On December 30th, I saw her off, and a taxi came for her. I asked her to stay, albeit with hope, but she replied that she couldn't because it would affect her professional reputation. Her boss didn't like refusals, and it could negatively impact her career. Of course, she earned good money, unlike me, who worked as a teacher. Although I had a decent and stable salary, it wasn't as high as hers. When my wife left, I decided to let her relax and have fun. After all, she had attended events organized by her company before. I always let her go, but this time I felt a strange emptiness, worry, and a sense of something unpleasant that threw me off balance. Around 10 o'clock at night, I called my wife. She picked up the phone, but due to the loud music and the sounds of revelry, I had to shout to make myself heard. I asked her when she was planning to come home. She replied that they had decided to continue the celebration and she would be back 2 hours later. Amidst all the noise, I heard someone persistently calling my wife to dance. The appointed time passed and my wife still hadn't come home. When I tried to call her, her phone was turned off. She only returned in the evening of the next day, 4 hours before New Year's Eve, and she seemed slightly tipsy. She passionately kissed me on the lips. Throughout the time she was gone, a sense of foreboding never left me. I couldn't sleep, waiting for her, and every 15 minutes I called her, her friends, acquaintances, and relatives. I only had one colleague's number, her friend from work, but even that turned out to be unreachable. I decided that if she didn't come back by New Year's, I would go to the police. Just in case, I took our child to my mother's. When she entered, I immediately asked her why her phone was turned off. My wife widened her eyes and feigned surprise, saying she didn't know why it was off and why I hadn't called her. She said that perhaps the phone accidentally turned off by itself. After she quickly took a shower, she immediately rushed to the kitchen to help me finish the cooking. Although, in reality, I had already prepared almost everything. All that was left was to mix the salads and decorate them. Throughout the time she was busy in the kitchen, I never stopped trying to find out where she had disappeared to, considering she had only left for a few hours. But she kept postponing the conversation for later. I welcomed the New Year intention, even though my wife tried to cheer me up, talking about love, our child, and the future. She even started crawling onto my lap and kissing me. But I could see that she was doing it forcedly, unnaturally. She had never behaved like this before. I realized that my wife was hiding something. After she had 3 glasses of champagne, she became slightly intoxicated. I myself hardly drank, just took a sip from the flute when midnight struck, and that was it. Around 2 o'clock in the morning, my wife said she was very tired and going to bed. I didn't wake her up early in the morning. I knew where they were celebrating the holiday, so I decided to go there. During the drive, I deliberately turned off my phone. An hour later, I arrived at the venue. Fortunately, it was the 1st of January, and there were few cars on the road. I found the head of security, who turned out to be a beautiful woman in her 50s. We talked, and she told me that indeed, such a company was celebrating New Year's. However, they didn't go home because they had rented not only the restaurant, but also hotel rooms, and everything was paid for in advance. The only thing they refused to show me was the footage from the cameras, explaining that it was confidential information. But as the saying goes, the castle gates will always open for gold-laden donkeys. I found a security guard who, for a certain sum, showed me and copied everything I needed onto a flash drive. I assured him that these video materials would not leave my hands. Yes, I saw my wife. She wasn't heavily intoxicated. I saw her walking towards a room with a man who gently held her waist. I saw them stand in front of the room, passionately kissing. I saw them enter the room. An hour and a half later, I saw the first man leave the room, and then he returned with another man. Sometimes I partially saw what was happening inside the room because the camera was located in the corridor and only captured a portion of the room with the bed. Although I observed only fragments when the door was opened, it was enough. I saw my wife with one man at first, then I saw him leave and another man arrived. And then I saw my wife with both of them at the same time. In between their sexual encounters, they drank champagne, talked, and then resumed their activities. This went on throughout the night. The men left my wife's hotel room closer to 11 a.m. the next day. One man came out first, and the other stayed behind, leaving an hour later. An hour later, my wife herself emerged from the room. The final shots were already outside, where my wife and her colleague got into a taxi. I was driving home, consumed by anger and frustration. A couple of times I almost got into an accident, but I didn't stop. I arrived home late at night. Watching the video and downloading the necessary episodes took up the entire day and evening. My wife greeted me first with anger, but then, as she looked at me, her anger turned into concern and hurt. With a hurt tone in her voice, she asked where I had disappeared to and why my phone was unreachable. I said that no one had called me, took out my phone, and turned it on in front of her, saying that I hadn't turned it off. It must have shut off by itself. With feigned bewilderment, I said that I had also wondered why no one had called me. At that moment, I saw confusion and tension on my wife's face for the first time. I realized that she was contemplating something. So I asked her if she wanted to tell me where she had been all night, to be honest with me. My wife said that she had been at a corporate party, had too much to drink, and they left in the evening right after the party ended. She fell asleep in the taxi, and her friend brought her to her own home. She spent the night at her friend's place, and during the day, she felt very sick, experiencing severe nausea and couldn't leave her colleague's house. I asked my wife if she was telling me the truth. With fear in her voice, she said it was the absolute truth and that she had no reason to lie to me. That's when I suggested going to visit this colleague, to thank her and also to wish her a happy new year. My wife said she wasn't ready, that she was feeling unwell, and that she needed to put on makeup before going to her colleague's place. Besides, her colleague mentioned that she planned to visit her parents on the 1st of January and stay there until the end of the holiday weekend. So I told my wife directly if she would like to watch a new erotic film with me, where she played the lead role. It was at that moment that my wife was genuinely frightened. She said she didn't want to watch anything. I went, grabbed the laptop, and transferred all the video recordings from the flash drive. When I entered the bedroom again, my wife was quietly crying. I started playing the recording and placed the laptop in front of her on the bed. My wife burst into tears and began speaking incoherently, saying that she didn't want this, that she had been violated. That's when I suggested going to the police. Of course, she refused and began saying that she had had too much to drink, that she didn't know how it happened. She told me that she loved me and our little one, begging me not to jump to hasty conclusions. She said that we had a child and he shouldn't grow up without a father. She assured me that I was a good husband, and as a man, I fulfilled her in every way, and that's what she had loved and still loved me for. It hurt. It was bitter to look at this woman and listen to her disjointed justifications and assurances of sincere and unwavering love of our family, of our child. I was consumed by furious rage. I started yelling. What was she thinking when she dragged another man into her hotel room? What was she thinking when there were two men involved? Did she think about our family, our child, or me at all? And were all her corporate events like this? My sobbing wife began pleading for forgiveness, begging to start over. She claimed it was a one-time mistake and that she would never repeat it again in her life. She didn't want to lose me. She wanted both parents to raise our child. She insisted that our child needed a mother and a father. The child shouldn't grow up without a father and should live in a complete family. She said she was willing to die for what she had done. She couldn't imagine her life without me and our child. That's when I erupted once again. I screamed and asked the question, what, and most importantly, who was she thinking about in that hotel room? What and who was she thinking about when she went to that corporate event, knowing in advance that she wouldn't come back on time, knowing that everything was already paid for? Why did she lie to me from the very beginning? Who is that man she entered the room with, and who is the second one who joined them later? My wife stopped crying and sat there with a detached expression on her face. She said she understood everything, that she didn't want this, but it happened, and she was willing to do anything to save our family. She said that our child, and I meant everything to her. She couldn't imagine her future without me and our little one. Silently, I took out a suitcase and started packing my things. My wife sat there, as if frozen, staring at one spot and remaining silent. Hysterics ensued when I reached the door. She begged me not to leave, asked me to stay, begged for forgiveness, and tried to kiss me. She clung so tightly to my jacket that I could barely detach her from me, nearly tearing the jacket in the process. I walked away. I called my mother and asked her to keep the child with her until the end of the holiday. I asked her not to answer any calls from my wife, and most importantly, not to give her the child under any circumstances. I said I would explain everything later, that I needed to be alone. In fact, it would be better for my mother to leave with the little one and go to relatives. I booked a hotel room, ordered food and alcohol. I lay in bed with the TV on, drinking, snacking, and reflecting on moments from my life. Then I succumbed to a drunken sleep. The phone woke me up during the day. It was my father-in-law inquiring when we, along with his daughter and granddaughter, would come to visit them. I replied that we wouldn't be able to come, simply couldn't, that's all. When I returned home, I informed my wife that I was filing for divorce. I had thought everything through and realized that I would never be able to forgive her, that she was a cheater and whore, and she should leave my apartment as it was purchased before the marriage. As for our daughter, I would take legal action to determine her place of residence with her father due to the mother's immoral behavior. I turned around, walked out, got in the car, and drove away. No one stopped me anymore. As for her two colleagues, I found them. I gathered information on them, and it turned out that both of them were married and even had children. As an act of revenge, I sent their wives an erotic film featuring their husbands and my ex-wife. What happened to them afterwards, I no longer know. But I was no longer interested in that. I needed to start a new life. That's the story. Share your thoughts in the comments about this situation and the behavior of the spouses. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and be sure to like this video. It will greatly help promote the channel. Take care and have a wonderful day.